public losses and private profits while your storm insurance bills keep going up. The first grilling of state insurance commissioners since an explosive news report raised questions of how your insurers move their money. In the first hearing Friday in the investigation called by the House Speaker, your lawmakers demanded answers from the former and current Florida insurance commissioners. What did they know? When did they know it? Did insurance companies mislead state lawmakers, claiming losses but making billions? And why was a draft report showing it all shelved, ignored, while companies kept raising your premiums?
I know the number one thing out there to the people of Florida is they want answers as to why insurance rates are so high.
Did you find the information alarming?
It certainly raised some red flags.
Would you agree that the information in the report, at least based on its intent, is helpful information?
I could see it being helpful for legislators if it was a completed project.
How does the office justify receiving this report that seemed to indicate $14 billion went to affiliates and they just dropped the ball because they were too busy?
From there to here, State Representative Hillary Cassel of East Broward County is the Republican vice chair of that House Insurance and Banking Committee. State Representative Kevin Chambliss from South Miami-Dade is the ranking Democrat on that committee, right here at the table with us today. Thank you so much for coming in, because there is a lot to talk about there. And I want to, Rep. Cassel, since you are the vice chair of the committee, you first, and then I want to get your takeaway. Give me the headline of what you brought out of that committee hearing.
I think what we brought out of that hearing is a lot of unanswered questions. I think when years the legislature has been relying obviously on our agency heads, such as our insurance commissioners, to bring to us their expertise and to tell us what reforms are necessary. When they bring forth reforms but maybe don't share with us other reforms that are necessary, it gives us all a disservice, all Floridians a disservice. So we have a lot of unanswered questions.
And you're talking about the reforms that have been made, 2 special sessions worth of reforms for the insurers to have a better marketplace for them to do business, essentially. Kevin Chambliss, it's the first investigative meeting, more to come. What was your top takeaway?
That we have a lot of work to do. We have been told for several sessions now that some of the votes that we've taken in the past were so consequential and important for homeowners here in the insurance industry. But we now know that we took those votes without all the information. We were not properly given an opportunity to gauge some of this information that was shelved and held back from us. We weren't able to use it to evaluate how we voted and what that bill or those bills needed to have in them. And so now we have to pause. We have to figure out what's going on and make sure that we can, moving forward, make better, more informed decisions for the citizens of Florida. So
I'm hearing from you both a very similar reaction that we've heard from the public, eyebrows raised. Were we duped? And certainly there may be explanations, with respect to the industry. But I want to, for anyone who's not following this in the weeds, I really want to go through the crux of this are these MGAs, managing general agent affiliated companies to the insurers, and how much money they were getting from the insurers. Can you sort of, break down the relationship between these MGAs that were making billions, getting the billions, and the insurance companies, which are the same companies, claiming losses? And that is the crux of this whole sort of issue.
Yeah, that is the crux. What we have are companies that are really partners that, you could think of one as being the parent and one as being the child. And what's happening, because the insurance companies in the state of Florida are such small, what we call domestic insurance companies, they really outsource a lot of the general core concepts of what an insurance company does, which is, for example, claims handling. They pass that on to the MGA, which is where they can increase those fees. And those fees that they charge, they can charge that back in the premium, but there's no oversight as to what those charges can look like.
And that's, okay, 2 things. No oversight, because now the oversight to the insurance company, which are regulated by the state,
right,
is now going to an MGA, which is not regulated in the state, and you called it outsourcing, but it's the same company. That's where I'm sort of like, duh. What is the question there?
Well, the question is, where's the regulation? We are just learning about how the relationship is, and one of the things that I noticed is that there was the term that our supposed experts use, the term alarming. And when they were looking at the amount of money that was going out, they considered it alarming. And that gave me pause, because when you're alarmed at something, you stop, you reevaluate it, and you take notice of it. And the fact that they knew about these alarming numbers at the same time we were making such consequential votes, and they didn't take the time to even just let us know that, hey, there's an ongoing report that's happening. You should be aware of this as you're making this vote. To me, that's what's alarming.
Right, and what I heard to your point, so this report was in 2022. It was commissioned in 21, started to come out in draft form in 22. The former insurance commissioner, Altmaier, talked about how, well, it wasn't complete, it was a draft, so we didn't give it to the lawmakers. And then the question is, well, did anyone go to complete it? And no one ever did. It just dropped through some giant crack. But to your point, everyone was alarmed. Both commissioners say they were alarmed. And I think it was you that asked who dropped the ball, or how is that ball dropped?
Yeah,
do you feel like you got an answer to that?
Absolutely not, because at the end of the day, how do you justify something that not only was smoke, as they testified, there was smoke there was fire there, and there was red flags. And as I mentioned in the committee, we also know that historically this has been a problem that has plagued our insurance market. We can go all the way back to 2009 with the Insurance Consumer Advocate bringing this to their attention. You know, Pulitzer Prize winning journalists in 2010 addressing this issue, and multiple insurance companies have gone insolvent, where the basis for that insolvency is the claims, the money that was being sent over was too much, which means they didn't have the ability to pay the claims of consumers. And that's really the crux of where this issue comes in.
I really don't want to beat a dead horse, but some dots just don't connect for any thinking person. Am I wrong?
You're not, and the truth is, our constituents, they're the one who are, suffering the consequences because of that. When we make laws that affect their everyday lives, they expect us to make that from an informed space, from an educated space. Even when they don't agree, they expect us to have done the best that we could when we vote. That did not happen when it could have happened. At minimum, it's negligence. At maximum, we have gone now about 2 years without a really fully finished product that our constituents could have benefited from had we been able to have more information when we took that vote.
So the two special sessions that resulted in reforms, the kind of the big headlines are the cost of reinsurance, and I learned a lot about insurance from you, insurance attorney, the cost of reinsurance for companies, and also what the companies called excessive litigation, which the reforms went to stop. I mean, the reforms really did a lot for this industry. And then to have some 3-year-old report come out and essentially say that those may be perfectly valid fixes, but certainly didn't get to what appears to be the reason they were short money. And so what now?
Well, I think it was a bombshell that was dropped in that committee when the current insurance commissioner stated that when you have explosive litigation, it benefits these types of companies, because this is actually where they generate their fees from. So one of the questions I always asked when I was going to Tallahassee before ever elected, because as you know, Glenna, this is my issue, I was always saying, while litigation may be a problem, you have to ask why. It takes two people to engage in litigation. Why are claims being denied? When are we going to look at the other side of this and look into why litigation is increasing? So to find out that litigation could have been increasing because it actually benefited these insurance companies financially, I think is something that we need to look into.
Do you see anything rising to the level of criminal here?
I think that we're going to follow the truth wherever the truth leads us. You're seeing a very bipartisan, a unified approach to ask the real tough questions. Yeah. And wherever that leads us, we'll be there.
I want to take a quick commercial break, and we can come back. But where there's smoke, there's fire is one of those lines that I just keep sticking in my head. But we'll talk more when we come back. Stay tuned. We are back with State Reps Hillary Cassel and Kevin Chambliss on this really incredible, I want to say unprecedented insurance company investigation. I just want to button this up a little bit. There was some talk about trade secrets being an excuse, or a reason, I should say, that the insurance companies don't divulge some of the data that would help you really assess and create laws that would help. Is that an issue? And how can there be trade secrets when this is a regulated state industry? Kevin?
Well, I'll tell you, our constituents definitely feel that it's an issue. They've mentioned that several times in their communications via email and on the telephone when they're talking about the stories about what their families are going through, how they're calculating their future financial decisions. And they're like, but you guys are voting and you're making decisions with all these trade secrets. How can you accurately make a decision if you don't have access to the information?
And trade secrets, I guess, is a legitimate corporate tool for many reasons. But in this particular case, trade secrets can be a banner headline on anything they don't want to tell you.
Yeah, and the trade secret component of this is really problematic. It's something that the insurance industry has the ability to utilize whenever they so choose, because to challenge it requires you to bring litigation against them. And they usually win. To name anything as trade secret or confidential or proprietary in nature is a really easy standard for them. And I definitely think it's something that we need to look into to see how we can better balance transparency and access to that information.
So it sounds like even though this was the first of, I don't know how many meetings to come, I think Speaker Perez says until we're done, until we find answers. Do you have sort of a cooking in your brain, some kind of proposed legislation that might start to close this up?
I think that it's important that we get a complete report before we get too far into the details of what future legislation looks like. Because right now we're second guessing past legislation. We need that report to be complete. We need it to have the information that's meant to be in it for that to be done at a professional level. And I think we need to come back and have a conversation. And I will tell you this, I think both parties agree with me. We want that conversation because we want to produce the best product for the state of Florida.
Actually, you have a bill filed right now to allow more litigation to insurance companies.
Well, it's not that it would allow more litigation. It actually brings that pendulum that I think we swung too far back towards the middle. The reality is right now consumers are paying the highest prices in insurance premiums with the least amount of coverage. And when it's time to hold their insurance companies accountable, they're not able to. And if they are able to, they have to pay out of their own pocket to hire a lawyer to get what they were always contractually owed under the insurance policy. But my bill also allows the insurance company to defend against those frivolous lawsuits, those lawsuits that they believe actually have fraud. And in the event that they prove that and they win, the consumer who brought that frivolous lawsuit would be responsible for paying the insurance company's fees. And I think that's the balance that we need, because consumers going against deep-pocketed insurance companies is pretty near impossible to do it on their own dime.
A lot of the equation is not very fair and balanced in that. Kevin Chambliss, you brought up bipartisanship, and so I want to sort of switch gears a little bit. No secret that Hillary Cassel, you were one of two Democrats to switch to the Republican Party. Water under the bridge, and I don't want to relitigate that whole thing, but here's what I think constituents really want to look at you and both of you and say, does your party in this time in that Capitol dictate what you do? Have your principles change? Well, you cited principles as the reason for your switch. So does your votes change depending on if you have a D or an R in front of your name?
I think anybody that followed me in my first 2 years as a legislature would tell you that I was an extremely thoughtful and common sense approach to legislature. I didn't look at legislation whether it had an R or a D. I looked at it for the policy we were passing and how it was going to impact Floridians. I often went against voting with Republicans in common sense areas. So I don't think it matters. I think what matters is I represent 180,000 people. Not all of them are Democrats, not all of them are Republican. And what's the policy before me? How does it impact Floridians? And is it something that I can go back home and look my constituents in the face and say, I think this was the best policy for my district and for Florida?
So your vote, I'm hearing, would be the same. it's the policy, not the party?
It's the policy, not the party. As an attorney, I look at the words on the paper. It never mattered to me whether it was a Republican or a Democrat bill. What problem are we trying to solve? Is it a problem that needed to be solving? Could I effectively work with that sponsor to make the bill better, which is something I was known for in the legislature? And was it something that I felt, like I said, I could come back to my constituents and say, I advanced policy that was in their best interests, and I still plan to do that regardless of the letter next to my name.
I would love to get a Democrat's perspective on that, because for a Democrat to lose in a supermajority Republican-Democrat House right now and Senate, to lose the numbers is problematic for a party. But you're listening to this, and what do you think as a Democrat?
Well, I'll tell you that if we were talking about previous sessions, I probably would have a different opinion. But what we've seen in this session is a new approach to the legislature. You've seen Leader Driscoll come on and say after a report, we need to find out what's going on. You saw Speaker Danny Perez then turn around and say, we are going to hold hearings and hold people accountable. So I'm seeing more bipartisanship this session than I've seen in my tenure there. And so I definitely can understand someone's perspective. It's important that people choose their principles and go where their principles lead them. And so I don't judge that at all. What I will tell you is that when it comes to this particular committee, when it comes to the issue of insurance, nothing has changed about my good friend, Representative Hillary Cassel.
And I would like to add, Glenna, obviously you mentioned my principles, and there were a lot of things and situations that occurred for me personally, especially when it came to Israel, that were problematic, and I no longer felt that I was aligned with the Democratic Party because of Israel and for other reasons.
I had read that, and as those subjects come up, we're right here at the table, and I love bringing in all my DNR friends together like this so that constituents and our viewers can meet you and know you and hear you, and I invite you back anytime, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.